I watched the terminal clock blink from 6:18 to 6:19, as if time were stepping carefully around me, not with me. Tokyo's glass and steel threw my reflection back in pieces. Jawline I hadn't shaved in 2 days, eyes raw from recycled air, and crying in bathrooms. My boarding group hadn't been called yet. I opened the family chat and typed what felt like the smallest, most reasonable request in the world. Flight lands at 7 p.m. Can someone pick me up? I added the gate, the airline, the soft apology people use when they're asking for less than they need. Sent. 3 gray check marks appeared. Silence. I kept my phone in my palm like a pulse. Around me, departures rolled by in orderly white letters while my thoughts were all turbulence. On a seat beside me sat the carry-on I wouldn't check, her scarf, the notebook with the slanted handwriting, the wooden hairpin she'd bargained for under a red paper lantern years before doctors and sudden endings. Maya would have teased me about the way I folded that scarf, too careful, like it might break. She could make a joke out of anything. She isn't here to do that now. A reply bubble trembled, vanished, returned. My brother's name lit the screen. Busy, try Uber. A minute later, my mother chimed in, with logistics disguised as love. Should have planned better, darling. Rush hour is a mess. The old choreography. I stared at the words until they blurred into meaningless shapes. I typed back what I always typed. No worries. I can manage. The speaker cracked to life in 2 languages. Final call. I stood because you stand when someone tells you to, because motion sometimes feels like survival. On the jet bridge, the air shifted from airport cool to aircraft cold. I touched the overhead bin, some superstition about safe arrivals I couldn't trace to its origin. The seat buckle clicked like a small verdict. I tried to sleep and instead floated through the recent week in unbearable fragments. The white room with the green monitor, the doctor's careful mouth forming a sentence that never finished for me, the paperwork in a language I barely understood, the night I ironed a shirt in a hotel sink because I wanted to look steady at a ceremony where my hands shook anyway. The shovel of airplane light carved a bright path across my knees. I shut my eyes against it and found her laugh, that impossible sound that always landed before the punchline. A flight attendant asked if I wanted water. I said yes, then held a cup and forgot to drink. Altitude flattened everything, the taste of the almonds, the ache in my temples, the truth I kept trying to fold into a smaller shape. When the plane tipped toward home, the city below flickered like a circuit board. I imagined the drive I wouldn't be taking with my brother, the lane changes, the easy silence that used to exist between us before his calendar swallowed him whole, and my needs became emergencies only when public. The wheels hit the runway with a shudder that ran straight through my bones. My phone vibrated as if on cue, a promotional message about rental cars. I almost laughed. Seatbelts released. Overheads thumped open. People stood and reached and complained about legroom, as if these small discomforts were the whole of suffering. I stayed seated a second longer, hand on the carry-on, palm warm against all I had left of her. Then I stood, stepped into the narrow aisle, and moved with everyone else toward the door, telling myself the oldest lie I know how to tell. No worries. I can manage. The message was small enough to fit on one screen, but it felt like I had set a flare on the ocean and watched it sizzle out. I kept the chat open anyway, thumb hovering where the next sentence would appear if the universe felt generous. The typing dots blinked on, off, the heartbeat of false hope. Then Mark's name landed like a stamp. Busy, try Uber. It wasn't cruel. It was efficient. He's always been good at efficiency, at trimming anything unruly down to a manageable line item. The word sat there, neat as a check box, while something in my chest loosened and then cinched twice as tight. I stared long enough that my reflection ghosted over the text, my face layered on top of his reply like I could wear it instead of feeling it. A minute later, Mom arrived with her choreography. You should have planned better, darling. Rush hour. Your brother has the quarterly review, your father's back is acting up. Have you considered the airport shuttle? Her paragraphs made a case out of my need, and one on technicalities. I could hear her voice in every period, light and brisk, moving furniture around the problem so it looked like tidiness. I typed what I have always typed. No worries. I can manage. The words have become a reflex, a tourniquet you twist because you don't have stitches. I hit send, and the blue bubble drifted up to join the others, my neat little assurances collecting like lint along the baseboard of our family history. Around me, the gate announced changes in calm syllables. A child laughed 3 rows over, the kind that starts in the stomach and surprises even the person it belongs to. I wanted to be annoyed and couldn't quite manage the energy. I took out Maya's scarf and folded it again for no reason. Muscle memory. The silk had learned my hands, or maybe my hands had learned the silk. It smelled like clean air and someone else's laundry soap now. You can lose a person gradually through the things they touch. They become yours in all the wrong ways. Mark didn't follow up. He didn't ask how I was holding up or whether I had slept. He didn't need to be unkind to make me feel invisible. That's a skill we all perfected together. I thought about the last time we were easy with each other. 2 idiots on a freeway shoulder at 19, changing a tire in the rain, laughing at our breath in the cold like it was proof we existed. Somewhere between then and the corporate calendar and my carefulness, we stopped being the kind of brothers who met each other at airports. I opened a rideshare app and watched the tiny cars orbit a map of a city I wasn't in yet. Surge pricing glowed red. Of course. I accepted it like weather. My finger hovered over confirm, and in the small pause before I pressed it, I tried to forgive him, forgive her, forgive the version of me that still wanted this to hurt less than it did. The app chirped. A driver's name appeared, a stranger who would say, "Are you Ethan?" and load my bag without asking who Maya was. I locked my phone and felt the plane settle deeper into its waiting. Outside the window, the day tilted toward evening, that thin hour when everything softens, and you can almost believe the hard parts are temporary. I told myself the line I know by heart, the one that keeps the machine running. No worries. I can manage. The carousel coughed another belt of luggage into the world, and everyone edged forward like tide. I stood back, too tired to gamble elbows for position, watching black rectangles blink by under the fluorescent hum. My bags were easy to spot even before they arrived. Tape at the corner of one, the scuffed handle on the other, the carry-on I wouldn't let out of my sight. When the larger suitcase finally slid past, I reached and the belt jerked, a petty shrug from the machinery. The handle slipped in my wet palm. The case hit the lip and burst like a bad secret. Clothes fanned across the rubber in slow motion, socks and shirts, and a small collapse of my private order. On top, as if the airport wanted witnesses, Maya's scarf uncoiled and drifted down the metal edge to the floor. That color had always looked louder on her than it did in the store. On me it looked like an apology. I knelt because there wasn't anything else to do. The zipper teeth gaped like a mouth I couldn't close. I gathered what I could, hugging shirts against my chest, trying to fold and failing. A sweater I bought in a city I'll probably never see again. The paperback with her notes in the margins, little arrows and stars like breadcrumbs back to a person who made the world make sense. The scarf lay apart from everything, asking to be picked up last. I reached for it, and my hand stalled in the air, ridiculous as that is, the way you hesitate before touching a photograph as if the paper could bruise. "Let me help," a voice said, close and kind without trying. A woman in an airport vest was already kneeling, sliding underwear and a runaway shoe back into the belly of the case with the respectful efficiency of someone who has seen a lot and decided to be gentle anyway. Her name tag said Gloria. She didn't narrate her goodness. She just worked, and the sound of the belt thudding by became less like accusation and more like weather. "Are you okay?" she asked, not as a formality, not in the way people ask while taking a step away. She asked and waited. I could have lied. "No worries, I can manage." The words were right there, polished smooth by use. I looked at the scarf in my hand, at the small constellation of her handwriting peeking from the paperback, at the car keys that felt heavier than metal. My mouth opened and closed once. "My wife," I said, and the rest came out in pieces. "She died. I just got back." Gloria's hands didn't flinch. "I'm sorry," she said, and the apology didn't try to fix anything. She zipped what would zip, found a discarded luggage strap, looped it tight like a tourniquet, and stood with me. "I'll walk you to rideshare," she said. "It's noisy here." We moved through the crowd together, my suitcase limping, her pace matched to mine. At the door she pressed the scarf into my hand like it was a passport. "Are you okay?" she asked again, and this time I shook my head because it mattered to answer the question honestly at least once. She nodded like that was allowed, like not being okay could be a thing a person was, and still kept moving. Outside, the air had that wet, metallic smell of rain that hasn't started yet. I tucked the scarf into the carry-on, and told myself I'd learn how to close things without pretending they never opened. The key stuck like the house had learned to resist me. I shouldered the door, and the dark folded in, familiar shapes rearranged by absence. The cold met me first, sharp, unambiguous, the kind of air that bites the inside of your nose. I flicked the switch by habit. Nothing changed. The bulbs made a tired decision and stayed black. Somewhere a vent clicked once and gave up. I stood there in the threshold with my suitcase and the scarf and the hum of the airport still in my bones, listening to a home that no longer sounded like one. They had said they'd make it ready. Heat on, a few groceries, mail brought in. Small things, the kind of help people offer because it's easy to picture. I toed off my shoes and felt the chill through my socks, a sting that traveled up the shin and into the place grief lives. The basket by the door had decided to become a monument. Envelopes leaned and spilled, flyers splayed like cheap feathers, a rubber band surrendered in two. I scooped the stack onto the entry table, and a holiday card slid free, the kind with silver script and a family in matching sweaters smiling against a fake snow backdrop. It was stamped 12 days ago. I set it face down. The kitchen gave me a fluorescent sigh when I tried again, and then snapped back to dark. I opened the fridge to the dull light of a failing bulb. Air that smelled like old lettuce, and something sweet turned wrong. A jar of mustard, a quarter bottle of white wine, a plastic container I didn't want to identify. Nothing that could be called dinner without lying. I stood with the door open longer than made sense, just for the weak light on my face, then closed it, and leaned my forehead against the cool metal until the ache there was sharper than the ache everywhere else. My phone pulsed against my palm. Weather alert. Winter storm warning in effect from 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. Hazardous wind chills. Potential power disruptions. A cheerful exclamation point blinked like it was excited to deliver the news. I scrolled up in the family chat to the part where Mom had told me to plan better, where Dad suggested I drive carefully. None of it said we checked your thermostat, we turned on the heat, we left soup in the freezer. I dropped the phone on the counter, and the sound cracked the room like a small thunder. I found the thermostat and woke it. 52 degrees. The setting read, "Away." A note to self in Maya's handwriting still curled under the frame. Remember to change filters, her tidy arrows underlining the word like a promise. I pressed the up arrow, and the unit shuddered somewhere in the walls, an animal deciding whether to rise. After a long moment, a thin stream of air pushed from the vent, the same temperature as the room. I wrapped her scarf around my neck and sat on the floor because standing felt like ambition. The house ticked and settled, polite as a stranger. I pictured a pot on the stove, steam clouding the window, the smell of garlic butter and something warm baking. I pictured the version of me who could conjure any of that from mustard and a storm warning. My breath showed when I exhaled. I rubbed my hands together and told the empty room what I always tell it. No worries. I can manage. The sound came first, a throat clearing somewhere above me. Then a new silence, the loaded kind right before glass breaks. I looked up, and the paint over the kitchen doorway made a slow blister, a pale bubble fattening into certainty. It split with a soft gasp. A line of water found the path of least resistance, and then all at once there was a curtain where a wall used to be. It wasn't dramatic, not at first, just steady, indifferent, the way winter makes its case. The stream widened, picked up speed, sheeted down the cabinet face, and pooled on the tile with a confidence that suggested it had been playing this for days. I moved without thinking. Towels, bowls, the roasting pan we never used, anything shaped like a catch. The cold bled through my socks in a minute. Under the sink I found the little wrench Maya had labeled for that one valve by the street, her handwriting turning survival into instructions. I followed the wet marks along the baseboard to the utility closet, then out to the crawl space hatch where the shutoff lived. The metal wheel bit my palm as if offended. It turned a quarter, then half, then finally the shutter traveled through the pipes like a long exhale. Somewhere in the walls the water changed its mind. Back in the kitchen, the drip had slowed to a sulk, but the damage had already learned the room. The ceiling sagged in two places like tired shoulders. Water lipped under the baseboards and went exploring. The dining room hardwood buckled one plank at a time, a slow accordion. I pressed my hand to the plaster and left a print like a fossil. I called Mark first because he is the person you call when something breaks and you want a list. He answered on the third ring with the background noise of silverware and someone laughing at the wrong volume. "Hey, can I call you in a bit? We've got clients." "The house is flooded," I said. "Pipe burst. I shut off the main. It's freezing in here, and the power's flirting without." I waited for the inhale that meant he was already putting on his jacket. "That sucks," he said, practical as always. "Okay, did you try emergency plumbers? I can send a link. Tonight's impossible for us. Big dinner. Tomorrow morning, I can maybe swing by. Can I crash at yours tonight?" The words felt heavier than they sounded. "Just until I figure out heat. My head's not right." Silence the length of a head shake. "Guest room's full of boxes. Lisa's got a thing at dawn. Tonight is rough. You should find a hotel." "Right," I said, as if he confirmed something on my calendar. "Thanks." I called my parents because not calling would become its own mistake. Mom answered bright, already apologizing. "Bridge club tomorrow, the house a disaster, your father's back, the roads." "Sweetheart, we'd say yes if it weren't such awful timing. Couldn't you get one of those cozy airport hotels? We'll help with the bill." Dad took the phone long enough to say, "Be careful, son," and name a hardware store that rented dehumidifiers. I stood in the wet, phone warm against my cheek, and looked at the life we'd picked, the wedding photos slightly crooked on the hallway wall, the magnet from Lisbon holding up a grocery list that now read like a joke. Somewhere, air pushed through a vent with the same temperature as my hands. The storm warning on my screen flashed again, like a metronome. I put a bowl under the last insistent drip and watched it count seconds. In the next room, the floor made a quiet decision to warp. "No worries," I told no one. "I can manage." The basement stairs held the kind of cold that climbs. Each step hissed under my shoes, water slick on the wood like a warning I was too tired to translate. My phone flashlight cut a thin path through the damp, catching dust like snow in the beam. The air down there had the heavy, metallic smell of old coins. When I reached the floor, it took my breath away. January does, ankle-deep water, so startling I said something out loud to no one. The breaker panel waited on the far wall, a dark metal book with all the pages closed. I waited, socks surrendering, jeans darkening to the knee. Somewhere in the house a drip still kept time. I thought of the thermostat upstairs pretending to work, the way the vents breathed room temperature air like it had forgotten how to be useful. I thought of Maya's note about the filters, her tidy arrows, and that underline like a promise to a future we didn't get. The panel door was cold enough to bite. I set the phone in my mouth and flipped the latch. The first touch was tentative, like testing bathwater. Nothing. Then, as my fingers grazed the main, the world went white and thin. The jolt ran up my arm and into my teeth, a bright, mean thread that pulled everything tight and then let go. The phone hit the water with a small, elegant splash. I staggered back, heel sliding on algae-slick concrete, and the next thing was the edge of the step catching the back of my calf, the angle of the floor wrong, gravity making a quiet case against dignity. My head found the corner of a shelf. A clean, surprised pane opened at my temple. For a second the basement tilted, then narrowed to the size of a thimble. I sat where I fell because standing meant negotiating with more variables than I had left. The buzzing in my fingers tried to be a song. Warmth threaded down my face, slow and deliberate. When I touched it, my hand came away red in the flashlight's wobble. The beam swung and painted the walls with light like a bad disco. Somewhere near my ankle, the water ticked against cardboard, then lapped. I knew things, in the way you know them from pamphlets and school assemblies. Water and electricity, head wounds, hypothermia. I also knew that moving was everything. Crawling is a verb you only remember when your body insists. Palms flat, knees dragging cold through denim, I followed the base of the wall and then the steps. Each riser was a small negotiation. At the top, the air felt colder, which seemed impossible until I realized the sweat at my hairline had gone icy. I left a line on the floor that would be dramatic later if I cared to look at it. The couch was 3 rooms away and might as well have been a county line. I made it by choosing the next object and then the next, chair, doorframe, table edge, until the cushions took me like a tide. The house clicked in the walls. The carbon monoxide detector slept quiet. My hand shook in a way that wasn't entirely mine. I pulled the throw over me and missed by half. The scarf was somewhere I couldn't get to. I tried to count my breaths and lost the thread at 4. The room pulled back like a receding wave. My last clear thought was mundane and stubborn. I should set an alarm. I should call someone. The ceiling swam. The dark came in on soft feet, and I let it. The sound threads into my sleep like a mosquito at first, a thin insistence that won't decide whether to be dream or fact. Then it sharpens. The carbon monoxide detector doesn't beep. It screams. Urgent, high, the kind of noise that makes your bones want to stand even when your muscles have quit. I surface wrong side up. The room tilts. My mouth is dry enough to crack. Every breath feels like it forgot its job halfway through. I try to sit, and the couch argues. The throw has somehow migrated to the floor. Cold reaches up through the cushions the way water finds basements. My head pulses in a slow, offbeat drum, blood dried to a stiff line down my temple. The detector takes no breaks, carving the space into pieces. I know what that alarm means. I know you're supposed to move, open windows, leave. The verbs line up, and then slide off each other like wet cards. There's a knock under the sound. At first, I think it's part of the alarm, some new feature designed by someone who believes noise can save you. Then it comes again, more body than sound. Fists on wood, a voice trying to climb through. Hello? Ethan? The name lifts and bangs like hail. I blink toward the door. The room has edges I don't trust. The air tastes like pennies. Water, the voice says, to itself maybe, surprised and concerned all at once. Another knock, and this time a word right against the glass. Emergency. I tell my hands to push me up. One obeys. The other trembles, and decides to be decorative. The world narrows to corridor size. I manage 2 steps that feel like borrowing someone else's legs. The third step cheats and becomes a fall. The door is farther than I remember because the house has stretched. The voice outside is steadier now, pitched low like talking to someone who's fallen off a ladder. Ethan, it's Diane from across the street. I see water coming under your door. She tries the knob and gets the deadbolt. I'm calling 911. I want to tell her not to. I want to say it's fine, I've got it. Sorry for the trouble, the line that keeps me from needing anyone. The alarm slices up the attempt. I make a sound that isn't words. My hand finds the deadbolt and skates off. The metal is cold, slick, indifferent. The phone I dropped earlier is a dark rectangle on the coffee table, too far for the current version of me. I aim for it like a target and miss by a foot. The detector's pitch somehow climbs, a desperate violin. Through the window's edge I catch the blur of a coat, a flash of a scarf, a phone lit up against a cheek. Diane's voice leans into the call, clipped and precise. There's water under the door, and I can hear a carbon monoxide alarm. He's inside. He's not answering. The house makes a sound like it's settling into a new shape. The cold organizes itself, moves into my wrists and jaw. I think about the list on the fridge, the magnet from Lisbon, the way the scarf felt when I kept refolding it to make order. I think about the last word Maya said to me that wasn't sorry. The detector keeps counting seconds I can't hold. Sirens arrive before thought does, a distant chorus, then nearer, then right outside where the world turns red and blue against the blinds. Boots on the porch. The door shutters, splinters, opens like a lung. Air, fast and cold. A shape kneels in front of me, a voice with purpose replacing my flimsy ones. Hands under my arms, a mask over my face, oxygen pressing in like a firm reminder. Someone says my name until it sounds true. Got you, Diane says from somewhere behind all that activity, and I want to tell her she did. My vision tunnels in and out, small and then smaller, but the screaming stops and the world fills with human voices instead. I let them carry the rest. Fluorescent light makes everything look more honest than it needs to be. The ER ceiling is a grid that never ends, a lit chessboard moving over me, while wheels catch on hallway seams. Someone says hypothermia, and someone else says possible concussion, and the words roll over like weather reports. The oxygen mask smells faintly of plastic, and something clean, Each breath feels supervised. I try to nod to prove I'm cooperating, and the room lurches forward without me. They park me in a curtained square where time loosens its watchband. Electrodes bloom on my chest like pale coins. A warm blanket arrives and then another, tucked like they're building me back from the outside in. When I close my eyes, the light follows through my lids, an afterimage that insists on its shape. Behind it, Maya walks in memory, as if the floor always knew where her feet would go. The way she said my name when it was a joke, the way she said it when it wasn't. I file each version away like proof. A nurse introduces herself, and the name stays. Jessica. The syllables sit down and don't hurry off. She has that tone I trust, neutral, steady, a voice you can set a glass on. She takes vitals, glances at the monitor, at the jagged little city skyline of my heartbeat, and looks back at me like she's comparing the two. On a scale of 1 to 10, how is the pain? She asks. It's a question designed for math, and I bring her weather. It moves, I say, and she nods like moving is a number. She cleans the cut at my temple with a touch that is more apology than antiseptic. You're safe, she says, practical as a fact, not a promise. The word lands and unspools a little heat under the blankets. Anyone here with you? She asks, clicking something into the electronic chart. The ceiling grid waits. Footsteps pass. A child coughs next door. A neighbor found me, I manage. Diane? My family, not yet. Jessica's pen pauses, then resumes. No theatrical sympathy, no sharp intake of breath, just a small adjustment in the way she stands, like she's moved closer to the problem. Do you live alone? She asks. Yes. Any pets? No. She taps the box that answers a different question and then, without ceremony, says the truth out loud while she types it. Patient lacks safe support at home. The words sound like steel framing, functional, load-bearing. She explains what they're doing to me as if I'm capable of owning it. Warming protocols, oxygen for the carbon monoxide, monitoring for arrhythmias, a scan to be sure my brain hasn't decided to rearrange itself. When she leaves, she touches the blanket at my shoulder with 2 fingers, a calibration more than comfort. I memorize the gesture because it says more than people who know my middle name have managed in months. The scan is a tunnel that hums. I close my eyes and imagine Maya humming back, out of tune on purpose, daring me not to laugh. When they wheel me out, Jessica is there again, as if the hallway formed around her. We're keeping you tonight, she says. You'll thaw. We'll watch the head. She looks past the chart. We're also going to talk about where you go after. Not just an address. A plan. I want to say no worries. I can manage. The sentence lifts and then drops, heavy with its own history. Okay, I say instead, and the word feels like handing over a key I've kept on my tongue. She writes one more line in the chart and, for the first time since the alarm, I let the lights be as bright as they want. Hospitals have their own weather. The air moves in drafts you don't feel until a curtain lifts and a new temperature slips in. Late afternoon flattened into that gray hour when everyone waits for test results and family members go in search of coffee. A TV hung from a ceiling arm across the hall, sound low enough to be mostly lips moving. Jessica adjusted a drip and told me to rest. I closed my eyes and drifted in a lane between sleep and whatever comes after sleep when you can't quite make it stick. Somewhere outside my square of light, a paramedic laughed in the way people do when something isn't funny. You laugh to file it. Guy just flew in from overseas, another voice said, the consonants clipped with frustration. Text his family, can someone pick me up? Brother says try Uber. The syllables skittered along the tile and under my curtain. I felt them land before I admitted they were mine. There's not much privacy in a place designed to keep you alive. Stories move the way gurneys do, quickly, following the path of least resistance. The reporter was there for the storm, I learned later. Cameras like bad weather because it shows up on schedule and looks good on TV. He stood near the nurse's station with that half-apologetic stance the kind ones practice, notebook under his thumb. I dozed through the shape of him. Diane's name surfaced, then sank. The paramedic's voice again, softer now, like he'd put a hand on something fragile. Wife died. Alone in a cold house. Could have been worse. When evening arrived, it brought more lights. The hallway TV nudged its volume to compete with the cafeteria carts. B-roll of snow edging gutters, of salt trucks nosing through intersections, of maps shaded winter blue. The anchor's mouth-shaped words I didn't need to hear to recognize. Storm, outages, safety. Then my front steps appeared on the screen, familiar in a way that made my stomach tip. The camera held the ruined door, then the spill of water like a tongue. Tape cordoned off part of my life. The cheering climbed into place with the certainty of a verdict. Widower returns from abroad too near tragedy. Jessica paused with the blood pressure cuff in her hand. "We can change the channel," she said. I shook my head because it wouldn't matter. There was no other channel that didn't also have me in it now. They ran the text thread as if it were a weather map. My small blue bubbles. Mark's clean reply. My mother's tidy logistics. My steady, useless no worries. They blurred names, but left the shape intact. The reporter spoke in that careful cadence people adopt around grief, soft enough to sound respectful and firm enough to keep you watching. He said community. He said preventable. He didn't say shame, but it sat in the space between sentences, a coat on the back of a chair. The phone started long before anyone in my family arrived. The nurse's station rang and rang. Jessica silenced mine and set it face down, a mercy. Somewhere behind the curtain, a volunteer changed the channel to sports and then back, like pretending you can choose what story you're in. I thought of the message I'd sent across the ocean, like a paper airplane, and the neat way it had been returned. I thought of how fast a private failure becomes public when weather and timing conspire. The TV played my ruined threshold on loop, as if repetition could turn it into information. Jessica touched my shoulder, a small anchor. "Your neighbor did good," she said. The word neighbor felt heavier than family in my mouth and more true. I watched the screen flicker my house into something consumable, and tried to breathe like I wasn't a headline. They arrived in a gust of perfume and cologne, relief already arranged on their faces. Mark first, phone in his hand like a passport, eyes scanning the room for the camera that wasn't there. "Jesus, Ethan," he said, and kissed the air near my temple without touching the bandage. "We just saw. Look, the piece makes it sound like—" He broke off, composing. Mom moved straight to the tray table and began tidying objects that didn't need it, turning the plastic water cup so the logo faced forward, aligning the call button with the bed rail like a showroom. Dad hovered at the curtain, taking the room's temperature the way he does at a work event, measuring where to stand so he won't sweat. "We're here now," Mom declared, louder than necessary. "You'll come home with family." "Of course." She looked at Jessica as if the nurse might object to common sense. "We'll manage everything. People need to see that." Mark cleared his throat. "The station played the texts out of context," he said, and the word context did a lot of work. "Clients watch the 10 o'clock. It's already on Twitter. I'm drafting something that clarifies, not the details, just, the love and support." Dad finally approached, hands in his pockets like he'd forgotten what else they were for. "Son," he said, and the syllable was heavy with meanings I couldn't open. "We'll get you settled. This is not how we look." Jessica stepped in as if she'd been there the entire time, clipboard tucked against her ribs, voice set to level. "Hi, I'm Jessica. He's stable. He needs warmth, rest, and monitoring for 48 hours. After that, he'll need a safe place. Minimal stress." She let the word safe sit in the air for a beat. "Home," Mom repeated, as if closing a deal. "With us. We have the guest room. We'll take shifts. I can postpone bridge club." The last part sounded less like sacrifice than press release. Jessica turned to me. Not a performative pivot, not a stage move. She simply changed her angle until my eyes were the only ones that mattered. "Ethan," she said, quiet enough that the room had to lean in. "What do you want?" The question startled me like cold water. I felt the old sentence rise. No worries. I can manage. The reflex that patches other people's comfort over my need. It reached my throat and met the edge of the oxygen I'd been given all afternoon. I looked at Mark, at the way his thumb kept flicking the side of his phone though the screen was dark, and Mom, calculating the optics of a wheelchair exit, at Dad, already composing a sentence with the word proud in it that wouldn't touch the center. Jessica waited. She didn't fill the silence, didn't offer the answer that would make everyone easier to look at. Patient lacked safe support at home, she had typed earlier, and the truth of it had felt like steel, unglamorous and necessary. I want. The word dragged its feet but didn't stop. I want somewhere warm and quiet where no one is performing. My voice surprised me by not breaking. I don't want to be a prop in anyone's apology. Mom's mouth opened and then shut, a fish discovering air. Darling, we're your family. I know, I said, and it landed like a different kind of acknowledgement. And I'm grateful you're here. But I need help, not an audience. Mark looked at Jessica as if she coached me, and Jessica looked at the chart like it was simply next steps. We have options, she said, still speaking to me. A nearby hotel has offered a quiet room. Community partners can handle home repairs, meals, rides to follow-ups. We'll build a plan. Dad exhaled through his nose, the way he does when a meeting goes somewhere he didn't schedule. If that's what you want, he said, trying on neutrality. He didn't look at the floor warped by water, at the door splintered on television. None of us did. We stood in a fluorescent square and let the decision be small words that changed the shape of everything. They brought the paperwork like a bridge. Jessica and a social worker with a soft voice and a folder that held more hinges than forms. While the TV down the hall moved on to sports and someone's miracle shot, we sat inside a smaller story and wrote the part where I didn't go home to be staged. The hotel name sounded like a promise you make to tourists. Riverview. But Jessica said the room was quiet and warm and already arranged. 2 nights donated and more if needed. A plumbing company had called after the segment. They'd put me at the top of the list. A restoration crew offered to start tomorrow, to pull the water out of my floors and put the house back into itself. Rides to follow-ups came from a volunteer list with names that looked like regular people. A grief group met on Tuesdays and Thursdays in a church basement with bad coffee and, according to the notes, chairs in a circle that didn't require introductions you weren't ready to give. Yes, I said when they laid each piece on the tray table like instruments. The word came easier than I expected, as if my mouth recognized it as a tool. Yes, to the hotel. Yes, to the crews that would enter my damaged rooms and act like damage was a temporary condition. Yes, to the rides and the circle of chairs. It felt like signing for a package I didn't order but needed anyway. Mark's patience cracked on the 4th yes. Are you kidding me? He said, the whisper shout men use when they're performing restraint. You want strangers handling your life on camera? You want to be a story? His phone lit up again, as if to underline his point. They'll make you into a symbol. People at work are already asking questions. We can manage this as a family. I looked at him the way you look at a distant shoreline, aware of shape, not detail. You told me to try Uber, I said, not unkindly, just setting a compass. I'm trying something else. Mom stepped in with a save that wasn't. What your brother means is we want to help. Optics aside, it would be better, cleaner, if you came to us and we handled arrangements privately. Jessica didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The folder on my lap felt newly heavy with lived-in kind of help, warmed rooms, dry floors, a chair with my name on it only if I wanted it there. I thought of the thermostat reading 52, the mustard jar, the way the door surrendered under the firefighter's shoulder. I thought of Diane's knock and the oxygen pushed toward my stubborn lungs like an argument I finally accepted. I'm not a press release, I said. The word surprised me by being solid. I can be your brother without being your project. Mark's hands came up, then down. This is insane, he said. You're emotional. You're not thinking straight. I'm cold, I said. I'm injured. And I'm thinking straighter than I have in a while. Dad tried a quieter route. If this is what you want, we won't stand in the way. It was as close to support as he knew how to get from here. The social worker slid a key card toward me, corners rounded, the kind of plastic that says yes when every other surface says wait. There's soup at the hotel, she said, almost conspiratorial. And an electric kettle. The thought of steam rising in a room I didn't have to fix loosened something behind my ribs. I signed where she pointed. Jessica squeezed my shoulder once, a metronome resetting tempo. Mark stared at the pen like it had betrayed him. Unbelievable, he muttered, louder, angrier, like volume could make gravity renegotiate. I let the sentence pass. The truth didn't need me to defend it. They wheeled me past the nurse's station toward the elevator, the kind that opens with a sigh. Through the glass doors, I could see night stacking itself on the parking lot, slick and reflective. Somewhere out there, a stranger who would say, "Are you Ethan?" was on their way. I brought the scarf to my lap and folded it once, not to contain anything, just to give my hands a task that wasn't hiding. For years my reflex has been the same sentence, a spell against need. Tonight I tried a different one. "I'm not okay. Please help." And the world, improbably, said yes. The room met me like a hand on my back, gentle pressure toward rest. Someone had left the lamp on low so the corners didn't feel like decisions. Heat lifted from the vents in a steady hush, the kind of warmth that doesn't announce itself, it simply undoes the cold. I set the key card on the desk and stood a moment, listening to the absence of alarms. Outside, the river moved like a darker ribbon through the darker city, a shape you sensed more than saw. The windows sealed the night out without making me feel sealed in. They kept their promise about soup. The lid clicked, and the first plume of steam hit my face and did something to my chest that medicine hadn't managed, an old door opening in a familiar house. I ate standing up, then remembered I could sit, then remembered I could take my shoes off without bracing for cold. The bed was made the way only hotel beds are, corners tucked like certainty. I lay down on top of everything and let gravity do the talking. When sleep finally found me, it didn't ask for credentials. I woke to silence that didn't accuse. Morning made a gray square on the carpet. The river was there again, pretending to be still. I made tea with the kettle from the brochure photo and watched it boil, surprised by how satisfying it is to bring water to a decision. The first sip went all the way to my hands. I showered until the mirror blurred and a different person looked back, one with color returning to his face, bandage smaller than memory, eyes not fighting every second. I didn't recognize him. I decided that was allowed. There were messages, of course. Some I opened. Diane's, a simple heart and, "Here if you need anything. No pressure." Jessica's update, clinical and kind. Mark's, careful sentences built for an audience that wasn't me. Mom's long paragraph about appearances, about how people misunderstand, about forgiveness as if it were a group event. I put the phone face down and let the world be bigger than its rectangle. In the quiet, her voice found the room. Not loud, not ghostly, just the way memory moves when it knows you're finally still. "You don't have to earn love to deserve care." She'd said it after a flu that turned me useless, after I apologized for needing soup and a hand on my forehead. I'd argued then, because arguing is easier than receiving. She'd laughed, kissed my knuckles, and said it again, slower like she was teaching me a second alphabet. I wrapped the hotel robe around a body I was trying to be gentle with and sat by the window. People moved along the river path, small and determined inside their coats. I tried the sentence on my own mouth. "You don't have to earn love to deserve care." It felt strange, like wearing someone else's jacket that somehow fit better than mine. The kettle clicked off behind me. Heat breathed from the vents. A restoration crew was somewhere in my house measuring damage and making plans. A chair in a church basement had a space saved that didn't require me to be good at anything. I ate the second container of soup without apology. I napped because I could. I breathed on purpose a few times, counting to 4 like a beginner. In the margin of a hotel notepad, I wrote 2 lists, things I can do today and things I don't have to. Under the first, drink water, answer Diane. Under the second, fix the past, manage anyone's optics, pretend I'm fine. The pen left a groove you could feel even if you closed your eyes. I kept the page. It felt like proof that even here, in a room I didn't own, I was allowed to exist without performing my worth. The knock was modest, the kind people use when they're not sure if a door belongs to sleep. I opened it to Diane with a paper bag and the kind of smile that doesn't ask anything back. "Chicken barley," she said. "Made too much." We both let the fiction stand. She set the container on the desk, added a wedge of lemon, a heel of bread wrapped in a napkin, and a little packet of salt she'd slipped from some diner long ago. "I won't stay," she said, and then did, 5 minutes on the chair by the window, watching the river with me like it was television. When she left, the room felt warmer in ways the thermostat couldn't claim. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize and turned out to be the restoration team, voices bright, not giddy, just practiced at carrying people through wreckage. They'd sent a lead out first thing. Photos arrived one by one. Plastic sheeting curtaining off rooms like theater, fans with their blunt mouths, hoses and bright cords, machinery that looked loud even in stillness. A close-up of the crack that started it all. Another of lifted baseboards labeled like evidence. "We've got the moisture down in the dining room already," the caption read. "Subfloor holding. Ceiling demo tomorrow, then dry out, then rebuild." They had a way of saying wrecked things that made them sound temporary. In the afternoon, a hotel envelope slid under the door with my name in a careful hand. Inside, a note on stationery with the river embossed in blue. "Are you Ethan? From the driver last night." He'd written his name, Paul, and a paragraph about how he hoped I didn't mind him reaching out. "If you need a ride to any appointments, text me. No charge. Not charity, just neighbor stuff." There was a phone number. He'd drawn a small box at the bottom and written "You got this" inside, like a kid with a magic marker. It should have been corny. It hit like water when you didn't know you were thirsty. Diane texted again, "If the soup needs more salt, it's not the soup. It's grief." I squeezed the lemon over the bowl and ate until I felt something shift that wasn't only hunger. The crew sent a second round of photos with thumbs-ups, half in frame. People who didn't know me proving to themselves and to me that progress is a visible thing. One showed the thermostat in my house reading 62, then 67, then a small, celebratory 70. I stared at that number longer than I should have, as if warmth itself were a person arriving. Little Mercis kept choosing the door. A front desk clerk who slipped me extra tea bags with a conspirator's nod. Jessica's message, "Lab steady. Rest more than you think you need." An email from the grief group with a simple line, "Come as you are. We have chairs in silence." I put the note from Paul in the drawer with the hotel notepad where I'd written my 2 lists. I saved the photos of wet wood drying into future floor. I rinsed Diane's container so I could give it back clean. None of it fixed the shape of the missing, the way the room sometimes tilted toward an absence with its own gravity. But together they built a small scaffolding around the hurt, enough to stand on, while I learned new balance. I breathed, and this time the air didn't feel like a test. They started with the parts that made noise. Fans with blunt mouths roared in the rooms where water had rehearsed its disaster. Dehumidifiers hummed like obedient engines. Plastic sheeting turned doorways into wind instruments. The crew moved through it all with a choreography that said this wasn't the first home they'd taught to breathe again. They named each step as if naming were a kind of repair: demo, dry out, roughen, inspection, finish. Words that stacked into a ladder I could climb with my eyes when standing felt ambitious. The ceiling that had sagged like tired shoulders came down clean. New drywall went up in bright sheets, seams taped with the quiet confidence of people who know how to make lines disappear. An electrician with a soft laugh traced the house's nervous system and shook his head at decisions made by previous owners who believed in optimism more than code. He replaced brittle runs with copper that didn't argue, added GFCIs where water and electricity pretended to be friends, labeled the breaker panel with a handwriting so tidy it felt like a kindness. A plumber with forearms, like tree trunks, talked about insulation the way some men talk about baseball. He wrapped pipes in jackets and rerouted the sketchy line that had frozen, teaching the house to hold its heat like a good secret. They installed a smart thermostat and handed me an app that let me nudge warmth from my phone, even from a hotel room with a view of a river pretending to be still. The first time the screen read 70 degrees from a distance, I took a screenshot like a tourist. Progress smelled like sawdust and primer, and a citrus cleaner that lingered after the crew left. The dining room floor, cupped and sulking, was sanded back into itself, boards stitched and blended until the damage looked like memory instead of warning. The kitchen lights came on, with a steady glow that didn't flicker, as if reconsidering. A new smoke and carbon monoxide combo unit took its place, like a sentinel that meant it. Every upgrade clicked into place with a small sound of consent, and in the quiet that followed I could hear the older story under the new one, the way I'd learned to live in a house that didn't quite work, telling myself it was fine because it was mine. I'd been practicing that lesson a long time, long before pipes and wiring. Growing up, we didn't name neglect, we called it busy. We didn't say no, we said later, and later became a place where needs went to thin out. Mark learned efficiency. I learned invisibility. Mom curated appearances, and I became the neat blue bubble. No worries. I can manage. The phrase had become my smart thermostat for feelings, turning everything down to a survivable 52. Convincing myself numb was comfortable. Standing in my kitchen with new light that didn't flicker, I realized how often I'd accepted the flicker because changing the bulb meant admitting the room wasn't bright enough. The house healed in increments, and each fix reframed the past like adjusting a picture until it finally hangs level. The door replaced after the fireman's shoulder had its own heft. It closed with a sound that wasn't apology. I ran my hand over the new trim and felt a steadiness I wanted to learn in the rest of my life. The app on my phone showed graphs, humidity dropping, temperature rising, proof that small, consistent work changes a climate. I stood under the new ceiling and pictured the old blister that had split open, the line of water that had made its argument. I didn't need disaster to justify improvement. I didn't need to collapse to deserve repair. The crew packed their tools and left the rooms echoing in that brief, hopeful way spaces due before furniture returns. I set Maya's scarf on the back of a chair and left the house, and I practiced keeping warmth without anyone performing for it. Outside, winter kept to its schedule. Inside, the vents murmured, and I understood, finally, that expecting more isn't arrogance. It's maintenance. The letter from the insurer arrived on a Tuesday, ordinary as junk mail until it wasn't. I slid it open with my thumb and sat at the kitchen table under the new light that didn't flicker. Numbers stared back in a serious font. The money didn't feel like relief. It felt like a translation, love measured by actuarial tables, absence rendered in commas. I made tea and let the kettle carry the room for a minute. Then I opened my laptop and the tab I'd been avoiding labeled simply, Fund. We joked about scholarships once, on a train rattling through a country where neither of us spoke the language and everything tasted like citrus. One day we'll help some kids see the world, Maya said, feet on the seat like she was always a little too much for one chair. We'll cover the important stuff. Not just tuition. The oh-no's. She'd love contingency plans because they were hope wearing overalls. I named it the Maya Rao Memorial Travel Fund, and the words found their shape without my permission. The application page asked for a mission statement. I wrote about opportunity and also about airports at 7 p.m., about time zones and hospitals, and the way distance can turn need into logistics. I wrote about the little emergencies nobody budgets for, last-minute flights for a parent's bedside, extra nights when storms ground you, the kind of translation you can't do with an app. The fund would cover airfare home in a crisis, housing during delays, emergency medical gaps abroad, and a small cushion labeled human. If a student needed a passport in a hurry, we'd pay the fee. If they needed an adult to pick up the phone at 2 a.m., we'd be that adult. The University Foundation sent a woman named Alejandra, who spoke about endowments, with a warmth that surprised me. She asked about disbursement schedules, investment vehicles, reporting. I asked about speed. When something breaks, I said, I don't want a committee. I want a ticket. She nodded and drew a little lightning bolt on the draft policy. We can build an emergency lane, she said, like it was a thing you could set in concrete. We built rules that made exceptions on purpose. We wrote a clause for grief. No documentation beyond a student's word and one trusted contact. We added a stipend for therapy sessions during or after a crisis, no questions besides. Where should we send it? Alejandra smiled at the human line item and didn't make me rename it. At night, I spread papers across the table the way we used to spread maps. I underlined verbs and pictured hands reaching for them. Apply, approve, book, return. I printed her name on letterhead and felt the way it steadied mine. When the fund website went live, the university tweeted a link with a photo of the river that runs past campus. I sent it to Diane and Jessica and Paul, then to Mark and my parents without commentary. The site counter ticked. The first application arrived 2 days later from a student in Florence whose grandmother had fallen ill. We booked a flight within the hour. Lightning Lane. I told Maya about it out loud, because the house had learned to hold my voice without echoing. We're covering the oh-no's, I said. The app for the thermostat showed a smooth line of warmth holding through the night. I imagined a student opening an email that said ticket confirmed and felt something in me unclench that had been braced since the airport. Money can't make a person less gone. But it can put a body on a plane at the right time. It can buy an hour you won't regret for the rest of your life. That seemed like a kind of love I was finally allowed to give. It came in an envelope with my name written, like he was concentrating. No return address, just the quiet of real paper. I turned it over twice at the kitchen counter, half expecting it to apologize for existing. Inside, a single page. His handwriting was neater than I remembered, the engineer's print he'd used on garage notes and Christmas lists. "I've been thinking," it began. "Not about the news. About the door. About the cold. About the sentence you always use, 'No worries, I can manage,' and where you learned it. I'm not going to explain us away. There are reasons, but they live on my side, not yours. I'm sorry I did not ask how you were, and that when you needed a hand I offered a schedule. I should have been there. I failed you as a father in ways that are painfully simple. The man Maya loved would be proud of the man you are trying to be. If you can stand it, I'd like to start again, not as we were, but as we might be. No storm, no optics, no advice. Just recognition, laid flat on the page." I read it twice, then a third time for the spaces between lines. The kettle clicked off behind me like a period. I thought about every, later, that had stretched until it snapped, about the years we translated need into inconvenience. I thought of the hospital room, and the way he'd said son like a decision he couldn't quite make. I wrote back at the table where the new light didn't flicker. I kept it short on purpose, the way you test a bridge with one careful step. "Thank you for the letter," I began. "There's a path I can consider. Slow and simple. No holidays, no groups. Lunch, just us, once in a while. No photos. No statements. If we do this, we do it without performance. I will leave when I need to. We talk about what's true, even if it's quiet. If that works, choose a Tuesday and a place without a script." I didn't apologize for drawing lines. I didn't soften them with jokes to prove I wasn't difficult. I folded the page and addressed the envelope by hand, surprised by how adult my own handwriting looked when I gave it something it believed. His reply came as a text 2 days later, abbreviated in a way that felt like humility. "Understood. Tuesdays are good. There's a diner by the river. No one we know goes there. I'll be on time." He was. The first lunch was a study in small talk that refused to stay small. He asked about the repairs and listened like the details mattered. When I said, "Smart thermostat," he smiled at the word like he liked the idea of a house learning. He didn't touch the word grief, and I didn't throw it at him. We let it be present like a third person in the booth. When the server refilled coffee, he folded his hands and said, "I should have picked you up." It was the truest sentence he'd said in years, and it made space for air. The second lunch was less careful. He asked about the fund and didn't turn it into a lesson. I asked about his back, and he resisted ranking ailments. We paid separately. We left without hugging like actors. Outside, the river moved with its old insistence. He said, "Next Tuesday?" as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Something honest had reached the table and sat with us, elbows visible. It wasn't much, but it didn't pretend to be more, and that felt like a beginning I could stand. K22 had the same hum as last year, that low electrical patience that makes time feel both scheduled and unaccountable. The boards flipped their letters with crisp little clicks, and the announcements came in pairs of languages, like a duet that never quite met in the middle. I held a paper ticket because I'd asked for one. It felt steadier than an app. The date in the corner did its quiet arithmetic. I didn't need the math. My body knew. People performed their reunions all around me. A little boy in a red coat counted down the final seconds of a FaceTime until his father walked out of arrivals and scooped him up like a continuation. A woman cried into someone's hoodie and then laughed the same breath out. A college kid wheeled a trumpet case to a mother who examined his face like a report card she already knew the grade on. Every hug had its own tempo. I watched and let it wash, not jealous exactly, just aware of the space around me where they used to live. I bought a coffee and didn't drink it. I reread the email from the caretaker who had sent a photo of the grass trimmed and the stone clean, the flowers I'd ordered standing like small flags in the light. I pictured placing my palm on the cool surface, the way the marble refuses heat at first and then considers it. The plane would take me there the way planes do, indifferent and miraculous. My phone buzzed with a weather alert I no longer translated into catastrophe. I slid past it to a thread called Hands That Show Up. It was a group I'd made on an ordinary Tuesday, because the thank yous didn't fit in one message anymore. Diane's name sat next to a heart and a soup emoji I hadn't known existed. Jessica had a stethoscope next to hers, because it made her roll her eyes. Paul's entry was just his name, plain, which somehow fit the note he'd slipped under my door. The crew had added themselves as a single contact, restoration, followed by a thumbs up I could hear. I typed without rehearsing. Headed out? Gate 22. Anniversary trip. I'm okay, just wanted you to know where I'll be for a bit. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, returned like breathing. Diane first, I'm so proud of you. Text when you land, I'll water the plant. Jessica, safe flight. Hydrate. Eat something you didn't microwave. Paul, do you need a ride when you're back? Consider it booked. The crew sent a photo of my thermostat holding steady at 70, a joke we all understood. Across the aisle, a young couple argued softly about a window seat, and then quieted into the comfort of choosing to stay anyway. I thought of the grief group circle, and the way people say each other's names, like they're placing them somewhere safe. I thought of lunches with my father that never pretended to be holidays. I thought of the fund's latest ticket bought on a midnight call, a student home by sunrise, because the lightning lane exists. Boarding began in the orderly unfairness of zones. I waited my turn. When I reached the jet bridge, the air changed to that familiar airplane cold, and some old part of me reached for a superstition, touched the fuselage with 2 fingers, make a small promise. I did it. Not for luck, exactly. For continuity. In my seat, I tucked Maya's scarf into the crook of my elbow. The engines wound up, a sound I'm learning not to fear. As we tilted into sky, the city reduced to lines of light like veins or circuitry. I opened the thread again and found it filled with more than logistics. Hearts. We've got you. Little jokes about airline pretzels. A picture from Diane of my porch at dusk. A nurse's cartoon of a plane with a smile I would have mocked once and now kept. The plane leveled, and the seat belt sign stayed on a fraction longer than necessary. I watched the wing find its angle, and felt the ache take its seat without trying to steal the whole row. Grief buckled in. Gratitude took the aisle. Between them, I exhaled. I was headed toward her with a map I didn't have last year and a chorus in my pocket that answered when I typed into the air. This time, I wasn't alone.